One of the most popular questions that we get asked all the time in EcomCrew Premium, and we joke about it, we probably get this asked during every Q&A webinar is, guys, I'm thinking about starting my blog. Should I host it on its own domain? So www.coffeecupblog.com, or should I host it on my existing e-commerce website, www.coffeecups.com? Which one's better? I'll tell you the pros and the cons of each of these things in this video. Okay, first things first, if you're considering whether you should be hosting this blog on its existing e-commerce website or on its own dedicated domain and its own dedicated website, just do it. Whatever you are debating between, the most important thing is for you to get your blog started, okay? It doesn't matter all that much whether you host it on your own domain or whether you host it on its own or in your existing e-commerce website. The most important thing is just to get started. So don't get stuck into paralysis by analysis. Just do it. That's the most important thing. But while you are watching this video is what are the pros and the cons of each of these two things? Let's talk about them. So both Mike and myself, we have our own content websites, authority websites hosted on their own domains. We have tactical.com, we have offroading.com. These are hosted on their own domains. Now, why do we do it this way? Well, there's a couple different reasons. The first reason to use your own domain, like offroading.com or tactical.com, is from an SEO perspective. Google's going to place you into an e-commerce bucket when you have an e-commerce website selling something like coffee cups. So let's say you're selling coffee cups and it's being sold through coffeecups.com, great domain by the way. Google is going to say, okay, this is an e-commerce website. So if somebody's searching for a buying related search term like cheap coffee cups or buy coffee cups, well, you're going to get a lot of preferential treatment from Google for a search term like that. Now, if somebody's searching for a more informative search term like what are the top coffee bean producing countries in the world, Google's going to have some negative bias towards your e-commerce website because they've put you in that e-commerce bucket. It's just kind of the way that Google works. So it allows you to rank for a whole different set of keywords. I should say it allows you to rank more easily for a whole different set of keywords if you host content on its own website and you don't kind of get mixed in with this e-commerce bucket that your e-commerce website has. Now, that's not to say that your e-commerce website can never rank for these different informative based searches, but it just makes it harder. So just keep that in mind. Next is from an authority perspective. So if you have an e-commerce website and you're trying to sell coffee cups and all of a sudden you have an article on the best 10 coffee cups in the world, well, people come to that site and they're going to think, okay, well, this site and this author is biased. Obviously, they're trying to sell their coffee cups, and so they're probably going to rank their coffee cup number one. Now, if you have your own separate domain and separate website and separate entity, and you have an article on the top 10 coffee cups, well, people are going to assume that you're a little bit less biased. Now, with our websites, we don't hide the fact that we also have e-commerce websites and we also have a blog, but we also don't go out of our way to make it totally clear to people at, through the header at the very top of the page, by the way, we sell coffee cups and here's our listing of the top 10 coffee cups. Different governments are very sensitive to the fact that if you're hawking your own products, you need to make it clear that you also sell those products. It's just like CNBC, when there's somebody on there talking about this great stock that you should buy, they have to disclose that they also own this stock. So the same thing goes when you run a content website on its own domain. You have to make it clear that you are selling coffee cups. But still, it's going to come across to the consumer as more authoritative, and also it'll be a little bit more trustworthy for them. If you have an e-commerce website and you have a blog, probably what's going to happen is you're going to have your entire navigation section on the top of the page for your e-commerce website of all the different product categories. And then somewhere hidden down on the bottom or maybe to the far right, you're going to have a link to your blog. And that just makes it a little bit trickier to navigate, especially when you start having subcategories for your blog. So when you start to accumulate dozens of articles, it becomes a little bit trickier to navigate for the customer. Now, it's not the biggest consideration in the world, but from a UI perspective, it's definitely easier for the browser and the person browsing when you have everything on its own website. Now, why would you host on your existing e-commerce website instead of a separate domain and a separate website? Because domains are cheap, 15 bucks a year, bam, you're done. Well, the big reason is not from the price of that domain, but the fact of having to maintain two different websites takes a lot more effort. Now, it's not 2x the effort. You do get some economies of scale there in terms of your time and effort, but it is a lot more work to manage two websites. And If that's going to be the deterrent for you to actually start writing content and start hiring writers to develop all your content, then just host it on your own website, your own existing e-commerce website, because it's way easier. And if you don't have the manpower to manage 2 websites or the skill and the expertise to manage 2 websites, just host it on your e-commerce website. Because it's going to be a lot more work running 2 different entities. In our case, offroading.com and offroadinggear.com. It takes a lot more work. All right, hopefully that answers your question on whether you should have your blog on your own existing e-commerce website or a whole brand new website. But if you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. Happy to answer and give you a little bit more detail into this big, complicated question of where to host your blog.